You're now tuned in to the hottest podcast in the world, the Stay Woke Podcast, right here on the SonicBreakdown.com.
This episode of the Stay Woke Podcast is sponsored by Concrete Flower Clothing. Hip-hop legend Tupac Shakur once stated, "You see, you wouldn't ask why the rose that grew from concrete had damaged petals. On the contrary, we would all celebrate its tenacity. We would all love it, its will to reach the sun." Concrete Flower Clothing is a dope company that has a strong hip-hop influence in their merchandise, so you should definitely check them out. Their Instagram is Concrete Flower Clothing, and their website where you can purchase that merchandise is concrete-flower.com. Welcome back to another Stay Woke podcast. I'm D. Ray Brinson, and today I'm talking with Anissa, who is a mother of an autistic child, and we're going to get to talk to her about that, get a little bit better understanding of what it's like to live in her shoes. So first I want to say welcome, Anissa, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get right into it. Let's just start with a few basic things, like where are you from?
Originally, I'm from the Bay Area. I was born in Hayward, California, and I lived actually in the same house my whole life, most of my childhood until 18. And then I moved to Fremont, and then shortly after that, I moved to Los Angeles.
Okay. What inspired the move to LA?
Originally wanted to go to school because there were so many cutbacks with the schools in the Bay Area. I was having a hard time trying to get into classes that I needed. So I thought if I moved to a bigger city, I would have better opportunities to finish school. Also, my work, they allowed me to transfer without any problems. So it was a pretty easy decision.
Oh, that's nice. What were you like as a kid? What was your life growing up?
I am the middle child. I have an older brother and a younger brother. Mm-hmm. And I'm the only girl, and I was very shy, very quiet growing up, a big tomboy. I loved sports, but I had a really good childhood. My parents worked a lot to provide for me and my brothers to be able to join sports and do different things in school. So a lot of my childhood was spent with my grandparents, who I was really close to growing up and with my cousins. So it was pretty awesome. We all hung out, all of my cousins, every single day at my grandmother's house while our parents were at work. Okay.
So it sounds like you have a close-knit family. Is it still that way?
I do. Now I talk to my parents, not as often as I'd like, but they're very we're all very close. They come and visit about once a month, and I try to go out there often, but with my schedule, my son's schedule, it's pretty hectic here, so they make their way out for a weekend every month. Okay,
that's pretty awesome. That's nice that you have the family that's close like that, as well as the ability to visit you as often as they do.
I know. I'm very thankful that it's a short drive away, because there are a lot of people who move and they're so far from their parents, and it's flights or it's a lot harder for them to be able to keep a close relationship. So I'm very thankful for that.
I want to kind of segue this into doing research for this podcast and doing research about this topic. I found that there's a split between people in that, I guess, community about the term of autism versus autistic. Do you have a preferred term that you rather be used?
So for me personally, I'm not offended by either term, but this is a huge issue with the autism community. And a lot of people believe that the person should be referred as a person before the disorder or the diagnosis. So a child with autism versus being autistic. The same as if you had cancer, you wouldn't be known as cancer, you would be known as a person with cancer. So it's very sensitive for a lot of parents. Me personally, it doesn't bother me. I introduce my son as autistic, or if, he is doing something that maybe other kids are looking at him or, not understanding why he's doing it, then I explain it with, he is autistic. That's just something that naturally comes out. I do understand why it's a big problem for a lot of people to refer to a child or a person as autistic. But yeah, for me, I'm good. I'm not offended either way.
When did you find out about that controversy about the terms? Because I'm relatively new to this, but I'm assuming this was something that you found out earlier on.
Yeah, I'm actually a part of a lot of different groups, a lot of groups about parents or groups of parents with autism, or just any different developmental delays.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of topics that come up, and people just will ask, like, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think about that? We talk about everything with autism. So I think I first heard people talking about it maybe about a year ago. And, it was interesting to me just because I'm not easily offended. So I didn't ever think anything was wrong with me labeling my son as autistic instead of a person with autism. But yeah, listening to other people's responses and how it made them feel, that made me more careful with approaching or talking to other parents that had children with autism.
Yeah, like I said, I just found out about that, so I'm definitely will choose my words more wisely when I'm talking about this subject because I don't want to offend anybody, and if you don't know, you don't know. So I thank you for breaking down the difference in why it is offensive, so others out there don't offend people incidentally.
Yeah, no problem.
As a mother growing up or having a child with that disorder, is it considered a disorder, a disease, a condition? What is the also best terminology in that regard as well?
So it's not a disease, but it's a disorder, I guess they would say, because what it's classified, the medical term is autism spectrum disorder, so
Okay.
ASD. So sometimes people will just say ASD, that's also autism. But now there's kind of an umbrella of what ASD is, and like Asperger's falls into that, which before Asperger's wasn't considered autism. It was two separate things. They still are treated very differently, but I read that for medical reasons, to be able to receive like medical benefits and treatments, they had to basically classify it as a disorder. So they kind of just put it under that umbrella of ASD.
Okay. And that kind of segues into another question that I did have in regards to health insurance. And because, of course, that's a big thing in society, especially with the Obamacare, Trump care division and the changing of health care. How do you think that kind of changes will affect you and your son?
It's pretty awful because we received so much treatment when my son was diagnosed, and we received so much help. And like one of the big places that helped us was the regional center, and they kind of just guided us. It didn't matter how much money you made. None of that mattered. If you had a child with a disability, they had different people that could help you at different things. They sit down with you, they educate you, they tell you, what programs are around, what things are available to you. And this for us, was funded with Obamacare. So with any changes that are made, a big cut that is talked about is basically taking away funding for places like the regional centers and the schools, which provide treatment for kids like my son and my son's friends. So it makes me nervous just because my son is only 4. He needs these services to learn how to do things on, that we have been blessed to be able to learn easily. Things like holding a pencil, anything with fine motor, learning how to eat with utensils. Like these are things that have been worked on for many, many months. And I feel very nervous, not for myself, because I know that we were able to get help right after diagnosis, and most of it was free. But I fear for parents having children if that changes with a disability, because they won't have those options. And it's a life-changing thing that happens when you have a child or you have someone in your family with autism. It completely changes everything. So I just feel very, very worried for other parents and other people who may go through what I've gone through without the help that I've had.
Well, yeah, I can see that being very devastating if they don't have those resources, especially if you don't have a lot of knowledge about it already or you don't have the resources. Yeah, that can be very devastating. How many children do you have, first of all?
I have 2 children. My son is 4. His name's Max, and I have a 2-year-old daughter. Her name's Mila, and they're about 19 months apart, so they're pretty close in age.
Oh, that's cool. And congratulations on the two little ones. When did you find out about, or when was he diagnosed?
So I worked in the medical field 8 years before I had my son, and I got to work in a lot of different departments, and I got to learn a lot of basic medical knowledge, and ways to help in different situations. And I noticed maybe about 8 months that my son was not responding to me in a way that I felt was typical. When I would call his name, he wouldn't look at me. He had this toy, and it had like a little hammer, and he would bang the hammer over and over and over again. And it was like he was obsessed with that sound and that motion. And we just kind of laughed, and, we said like, oh, wow, he really loves that toy. And, at 11 months, I would, take him to the window, and I lived on like a kind of busy street, and look at the car and look at the tree, and do you see that? And I would point, and he wouldn't even like move his eyes. They would just stay at whatever he was looking at. And it was like when I was talking, like nothing was happening for him. So I started emailing my doctor or his doctor and letting him know, I've noticed that he's not able to do this or that. And my doctor said, it's normal. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing everything right. And I did again at 15 months. And I said, he doesn't have any words, and he's not talking, and I'm still seeing the same signs. I'm worried. And he said, a lot of kids talk late, especially boys. It's not a big deal. And, so then my last email was, I need to get my son checked for autism. I see a lot of signs in him, and he's still not talking. So they told me they can't diagnose him until 18 months. So I made an appointment for the day that he turned 18 months, and it was October 30th, I remember. We took him in, and right away the doctor said he had every sign, and that she read through my emails, and they were major red flags, and that the doctor should have caught that and, forwarded over to her because that's her specialty. And, that we missed a lot of months because the doctor really wasn't listening to anything I was saying.
And from my understanding, the earlier you catch it, the better it is to help with techniques about those fine motor skills. Is that correct?
Yeah, the earlier the intervention, the better. So there's a lot of different delays that a child with autism can have. And the earlier, and they also pick up it's not a bad behavior, but a behavior that's not considered normal. So we'd call it stimming. So like my son will hit his leg over and over again. That hammer thing where he was hitting with that toy, that's a stim. Things like that, the longer they go on, then the harder it is to break those habits, because that is how they learn to cope with difficult situations. So if maybe something is too bright or too loud, or there's just too much going on, they're very overstimulated, then they will stim to kind of break themselves from that moment, and to create like either an input or an output to make their body feel good. So if we were to have started months earlier, we could have stopped behaviors that had, grown to be more.
And instead of them being habits, because that's how we learn to cope with it, better ways to cope with it.
Exactly.
Okay. So to me, it sounds like you were really ahead of the game, and you were really attentive and noticing these signs, and that the doctor really wasn't responsive. I can just imagine that being frustrating, especially after the fact when you talk to the specialist and they tell you that. How did you deal with that frustration of knowing that you as the mother knew something wasn't right? And just, I guess it could be both, frustrating as well as relieving that you now have a solution or have an answer to what's going on.
I think for me, I was really frustrated when I was speaking with the specialist, because it seemed to be like such an easy diagnosis, but I was also very frustrated and very hurt. I felt like it was my fault, even though I sent emails and that I, noticed things and I tried to get help. I still felt like it was my fault. So I felt very responsible for his diagnosis. And I think that's something that a lot of parents with autism, they go through during the diagnosis. It's completely heartbreaking, and you're everything that you all of the dreams that you thought that you had for your child, it just feels so far out of reach and impossible, and you worry about things that you never even thought of. And I think that I just felt heartbroken and like I was responsible more than anything else.
Wow. I can't even imagine. Can you tell me again what age he was when you got the diagnosis?
18 months. So
okay,
18 months.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You said
the
earliest that you can get. That's right.
The earliest that they will, because sometimes they think that they don't want to do. I believe the reason why they don't is because the testing that is required to give a diagnosis is expensive, and that's not something they want to do until they find that it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, you don't want to put too much stress on the child unless you have to, kind of situation.
Yeah.
And you said that your children are 19 months apart, was that correct?
Yes.
So you were pregnant at that time too as well, so I can imagine, how did that factor in?
It made me feel really guilty and really selfish that I was about to bring another child into this world, and that my son was about to basically start a whole new world and a whole new life. And they right away talked about all these different therapies that he would have to do and about the process. And I was lucky that the doctor that we saw, the specialist, she expedited things because I was pregnant. So we were able to do a lot of the necessary appointments that we needed to do before I gave birth. And then my son didn't start treatment or his therapies until my daughter was about 4 to 5 weeks old. And at that point, I had already hired help to help with my daughter so that I could be a part of my son's therapy.
Okay. At any point during the pregnancy, did you have any worries that this might affect your child, the pregnancy as well? Was that any thoughts going through your mind at that point as well?
Do you mean with
with your daughter?
With my daughter coming? You know, it's really, this sounds awful, but I was so attached to my son, and I was so worried, and I had all these feelings for him that I feel guilty now that I didn't feel like my daughter needed me in the beginning. I felt like all she needed to do was sleep and eat, and that as long as she had that and she had love, and I thought she would be fine, and I felt like my son was just completely lost and I had to save him. I don't know, it was like he took everything that I had.
And how do you find the balance now? Or do you still feel like you're having that issue of finding that balance between the both of them?
No, so my son went through a few different things. So he started like a home therapy. So we had speech therapy, occupational therapy, and a behaviorist that worked with him about 4 to 5 times a week when he was 18 months, and they would come to the house. So I was able to be with my daughter and with my son. And then eventually he went into a school program and was gone 4 hours a day. And so I had that 4 hours to interact with my daughter.
Okay, so she got her alone time as well.
Yeah. So now that my son is in school, well, when he aged out of the program, he went into a longer program. So I had more time to spend with her.
So is he in a specialized school or classroom now? Like what is his educational regimen?
With the current way that the services work, from 2 and under, actually 3 and under children get services from regional center, and they're covered, so they're free. And then once they turn 4, they go into the school district. So when my son turned 3, we met with the school district, and basically they evaluate your child and tell you what they think that your child needs. It's a very short, maybe an hour to 2 hour interview, and they watch your child during that time, and then they basically plan out your child's next year. It's called, an IEP. So the school district covers that. So I was able to get my son into a school for children with autism, and the difference between this type of program and a regular special educational program at a school is that this program is led by a behaviorist, and there's one behaviorist for every 2 children in the class, and the behaviorist is trained to help the negative behaviors, to control them, and to redirect them. So they teach the children how to redirect them. And this is a 6-hour, 5 days a week school, and it has a speech therapist and a occupational therapist that are also part of the program. And they are able to socialize and interact with other children while getting one-on-one treatment. The parents get to choose the goals that are worked on for the whole year. So 1 year for my son, it was being able to identify 3 to 5 things that are things that he sees throughout his day. So it could be a pair of shoes, a backpack, a lunch. But when someone asks, where is your lunch, for him to be able to point out what that is. Then the occupational therapist works on fine motor and getting them ready for preschool. And then the speech therapist will work on whatever type of language that the child is working on. So whether it be like a textbook or a communication device that's like electronic, or if they do have words, then she helps them to work on communicating with more words.
I know communication is very big with parents and children that are dealing with autism. What's Mac's form of communicating with you?
So my son has never had any words. Some children have had words and they lose language. That's one of the big indicators of autism. But my son, he's never had any words. So he did start off with a PECS book, and a PECS book is a picture exchange system. And there's dividers inside this tiny binder that they carry on their waist, and they're taught to get what they need from the picture and give it to the person that would best help them. So that didn't work well with my son. He kind of started to overgeneralize with things, so everything became goldfish. And we knew he didn't want goldfish, but that was the first thing that he learned. So he knew that if I give you something, then you have to give me what I want back. So we eventually moved to a electronic communication device, and he's learning to use that now. He still doesn't have any words. He can kind of get out hi, but he's still learning the functions of language. So when I say something to you, you say something back. So even though he doesn't have words, if I say hi, Max, then he'll say something back. So it could just be I or bye or but he's starting to understand that that's one of the rules of language or communication. If I say something to you, you say something back. So now that he's doing that consistently, we're working on shaping that into a word. So he has like 5 different words that he works on every single day, and sometimes he's able to say things and it sounds really clear, and sometimes he has a harder time processing what we're asking. The biggest thing with communication is that the children with autism, they are learning and they're understanding sometimes what you're asking them, but they don't have a form of communication to let you know that they understand or that they hear you. So what happens when you want to speak, you have the thought in your head, and that thought goes, okay, you need to make your mouth make these, this shape, and your vocal cords need to make this sound. Well, for children with autism, sometimes there's a processing delay in that pattern. So even though their mind is saying, say hi, they can try to make their mouth make the shape, but they can't always also make the vocal sound. So there's a lot more going on than we realize, and it's very natural and very easy for us to say things, but for them, they have that processing delay that happens, which affects communication.
And I would assume that would have to be frustrating, knowing that you want to communicate something and you want the other person to understand what you want to communicate, but they can't. How does he express his frustration?
So I think it's frustrating on both parts. My son was a very easy baby, and even as a toddler, he was pretty easy. He's only now starting to get frustrated, and I think it's because he finally understands that he has choices. And before, everything that he did was in such a routine that he knew what was expected. But, when you try a new food, or you're like, wow, those chips were a lot better than my sandwich, and you realize that you have choices, then, not being able to say, hey, I don't want that anymore, or I'm tired of that food, or I don't want to watch this show. Since he doesn't have that, he does do a little whine, but he doesn't really have many aggressive or like frustrated behaviors. He will pull me usually now to what he wants. So if I put something in front of him that he doesn't want to eat, he'll kind of push it away. And if I don't bring him another option, then he'll get up and he'll pull my hand and he'll pull me to what he wants. And he doesn't know how to open a door or like a pantry door, so then he'll put my hand on the door, and then I open the door, and then he'll look around for what he's looking for, and if he can reach it, he'll bring it down, and if he can't, then he will try to get me to do it. Even when he's frustrated, he's such a nice boy. His frustrations are very, very small. I think I have more problems with my 2-year-old being frustrated than my 4-year-old.
Gotcha. What are some of the activities that he likes to do that you can tell that he finds enjoyable?
So he loves to spin and to jump and to swing and to run, and he's always loved to run. Like, he loves being outside and just running through the grass. He loves to watch trees and like the movement of things. He loves car rides. He will ask he'll pull me to the car to take him in the car just to go on a ride, and he just loves looking out the window, and he's very, very visual. When he was younger, he would look through all the leaves in our yard and just find one leaf that he like absolutely loved and would hold on to it. And I could never figure out why. I still don't know why. Like, if was it the texture, the color, was it a big one, I don't know what made it the perfect leaf for him. But I would grab it and I would put it back in the leaves and mix it up, and he would within a few seconds just find that leaf and pick it up again and hold it and kind of run away. But he's always been very, very overstimulated visually. So I think just being outdoors and watching things, even just people watching, that seems to be like one of his favorite things to do.
Oh wow, that's awesome that you found that, and that he gets that enjoyment from those things, and that is interesting about the visual overstimulation that, you know, outside, because a lot of people nowadays, especially with today's generation, everybody wants to be in their phones or on a computer and doesn't really enjoy nature, and just how the essence of sounds like what you're saying is just the slowness of just being outside, and just that kind of calmness, I should say, not slowness, but more calmness of being outside is enjoyable to him. I just find that interesting.
I know, it honestly has made me like go on more walks and spend more time outside and spend more time looking out the window. And I love it. And all the behaviorists and teachers at his school, you know, they always talk about his favorite thing to do is to run to the window and to just look out the window and watch the cars. And I know, you know, soon he'll talk, and I can't wait for him to explain why that's so relaxing for him. But, you know, I think maybe when things become too much, that's just like a break. And, you know, I love that. I wish I could find peace in that also.
Yeah, we can learn lessons from, like they say, you can learn lessons from the mouths of babes. So
yeah, for sure.
What would you say is one of the biggest setbacks that you've had just dealing with all of this? I can just imagine that a lot of it is daunting, especially in the very beginning, getting all this new information. Well, actually, how familiar were with autism prior to it, outside of your, you know, being in the medical field? So
even being in the medical field, I heard it a lot, but I didn't completely understand it. And most of why I didn't understand it sounds so ignorant now, but it was because the child looked normal. And I know that's one of the things that I hate when people say to me. It is so offensive, but I didn't, you know, I didn't understand what it was, and I heard it so much, and you're given very little information from people about it. So I had to learn everything that from the day he was diagnosed. I had to read books and go to classes, and I was very lucky that once he got into a school program at like 2.5, that they offered parent education every Friday. So we learned everything, like from potty training to why there's bad behavior to why communication is so hard and what is a stim, and, you know, how to help with aggressive behavior. And they taught me so much. So I'm very thankful for that. That was also provided by the regional center. So it was all free information. All you had to do was show up on Fridays. And yeah, I'm so glad I got to learn with a bunch of other moms and dads that, you know, were new to it too, because it was for all the children that were in that program, for the parents and family members.
Just with that program alone, with those teaching sessions that they give on Friday for the parents as well, it sounds like it would create kind of a support system within itself. Is that how you met a lot of the parents that you're in the groups with now, or how did that kind of relationship spawn?
It definitely brought a lot of friendships, mostly because we would see, well, I would always hang out, or I would try to hang out at the school as much as I could and just help out and watch and see what was going on. So I knew when I got home that we were doing the same things at home that they were doing at school. So seeing all the other kids and getting familiar with, you know, the problems and the strengths that they had, it was so nice to finally like get to meet the parents of those children. And then everyone would be able to ask questions and get answers. And, you know, when a parent would start opening up about what their child did, and it made us so close without us even trying, just being able to, you know, support each other and give each other advice. And, you know, I tried this and this worked for my son, or, you know, I didn't think of that, thanks. And it brought us really, really close. I'm actually really good friends with most of those parents still.
That's amazing, because I just think support and having people understand what you're going through without you always having to explain it. Because it sounds bad, but there's people that want to help, but sometimes them wanting to help and you have to explain what you're going through makes it more difficult. Is that something that you find yourself dealing with, trying to explain to parents that don't have children that have autism versus, them not having autism, explaining that to them? Does that seem bothersome, or does it get frustrating having to explain why some things are different?
I think now that my son is getting a little bit older and these therapies have been pretty successful and, have helped me to kind of cope with a lot of different feelings, I don't think that it makes me as frustrated anymore. But, I get together with some of the moms at my son's school and in his program now, and we get together about once a month and we just have dinner and a few drinks and we talk about things. And some of the funny things that we talk about are people like that, they're just like, oh, can you believe that so and so invited me to go to this outdoor park? Like, they have no idea my child would just run away. Like, we make jokes about like things like that. So I think now it's not as frustrating, it's just funny. But yeah, like, there's a lot of safety concerns that parents with autism have, and some people have children that are more aggressive. So, taking them to a place where there's a lot of smaller children or babies, it's hard to explain. Like, my son doesn't understand boundaries yet, So a lot of parents that I know that have typical kids, not we, but a lot of parents with autistic children, or that talk about the autistic community, we call them children without autism. We call them neurotypical. So we call them like NTs or neurotypical. And so we'll say it, like, they don't understand that if you have a neurotypical child, you can take them and do almost anything, and they understand when things are dangerous. They understand when they're in trouble. They understand that they hurt somebody. And these are things that we can't necessarily teach our children in, a year or two. Like, these are things that our children will probably work on their whole lives. So it used to be kind of embarrassing, I guess, before, when I would have to like decline things. But now I just think it's kind of funny. Like, people have no idea. I can't just do things the way that they do.
Yeah, a different aspect of life that they don't have to deal with. How does Max interact with his sister? How's their relationship?
It's better now. They're really close in age, so a lot of behaviors that my son has that are negative behaviors, she copies. So she tries really, really hard to get his attention and to play with him. But he's mostly interested in playing by himself. So I think their interactions are good so far. She's really persistent. She's very strong. She loves him, and she just wants him to be a part of everything. And I love that she never gives up. And I think my son is starting to like realize that she's there. In the beginning, I don't even know if he knew he had a sister or he recognized her, because he would just kind of run past her or walk past her. But now I think he's starting to really enjoy having her around. And the other day, he's pretty tall for a 4-year-old, and so he was able to reach something on the counter, and his fine motor skills are awful, so he couldn't open like this bag of cookies. So he looked at her and he gave her the cookies, and she opened it up and she poured it on the table, and then they both started eating together. It was like the first time
sweet.
I saw them like work together on something, but she knew he needed his help and he knew he needed her, and it was such a small thing probably to most parents, but it was the best feeling ever to me. That
sibling bonding that's to me, I can just picture it, and it's heartwarming. So, I mean, I don't have any kids, so but that image sounds very sweet.
Yeah, and it just it gives me so much hope for the future, that she will help him and he will help her, and that maybe it may not be an equal balance, but that he will also be able to help her. I worry also about, her future, and if something were to ever happen to me, all the pressure that she would have to help her brother, or even as, we get older, I worry about how hard it might be to be a sibling of an autistic child.
Have you talked to any adult people that have autism and how they're dealing with it, and kind of a preview of what it might be like for Max?
So the thing with that is that I do know, and I've seen, and I've talked to different people, but there are some people who are very very giving and very caring, and that it's natural for them to want to help, and they never feel like it's too much, they're giving too much, or someone's taking too much. And then I know there's some types of personality where, maybe they feel like their wants and their needs are most important, and that they, want to do things the way, for what makes them happy. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with being either types of those people, but I know that in most of the situations I've seen, there's multiple siblings, and there's one sibling who does most of the work, while the other two siblings, kind of live their life the way they want to. So that's what kind of worries me is if
Because
my
he only
daughter
has one. Yeah.
was 18 and said I wanted to go to NYU and I want to move away, I would want her to do that, and I would want her to do that for herself, and then I would worry about my son, that if something were to happen to me, that either she wouldn't be able to be that person that she was, or she wouldn't even want to.
That's a fine line, and it's hard you won't know until it happens, or at least until you get closer and you find out what type of person and personality that she has.
Exactly.
Do you and your husband plan on having any more children?
So we have talked about it, and we've talked about it so that, because of the reason that we want, to have multiple people that could help out with our son as he gets older, because, we don't know what his future will be like, and if he'll be able to live independently, or, if he will be roommates or in a group home. I mean, we don't know, what his future would be. So we've talked about that, but we also talk about how much time and energy we are able to give into both of our kids right now, and that we would be able to help without having more kids. We'd be able to take, both of our children out to see more and to do more, and that those experiences alone could be beneficial to him. So I think we talk about other children out of fear, but we're definitely happy where we're at. And, I think we're good right now.
That's understandable. There is benefits and risk associated with both, having that balance and figuring out which one is best for you.
The other scary part too is, what if we had another child with autism? Could I do this all over again? Every autism is different. It's so much work, and I feel like it's finally getting a little easier, that I don't know if I could necessarily do this again. I mean, I know I would. I know if when you're put in that situation, you do it. There's really no choices. But I'm honestly so exhausted, and I feel like things are just starting to get easier, and I can't wait to finally sleep again, like a full night.
A full night's sleep. Another question that I have is that there's a big, debate between people that have autism saying that a cure versus that there's really no need for a cure. What is your stance on that? And let me just preface it a little bit more for the people that don't understand the debate. Some people are saying that nothing wrong with people with autism, and that the world should more adapt to the way that they are versus having a cure, in essence, fix them. So it's kind of that idea of with a cure, you're saying that there's something that needs to be fixed, versus when you don't say that there's no need for a cure, that you're just saying it's something that we should live with and adapt with. What is your stance on that and your belief? And is this something that you even thought about?
I've definitely thought about it. I think that if I could choose for my son to be healthy or not, or to have autism or not, I would always choose for him to not have autism. But I don't believe in finding a cure. I think with this, it goes a little bit deeper. So they want to find specific genes that could give you an insight. If you were going to, while you're pregnant, you could get a test done that could tell you could potentially have a child with autism. Mm-hmm. Do you choose to terminate this child? And I think that, my child is not a perfect child, but I have learned so much and I've grown so much, and I wish that every person that was going to have an autistic child or a child with autism would enjoy the pregnancy and not think about the stress of what's to come, and to go through life as normal as they can until they find out that, that child has autism. I think that this whole trying to cure it, I don't like, you can already test for Down syndrome, and a lot of people choose not to have a child because of that. So that really, it hurts me to think of that part of it. But I don't think that there should be a cure either, because I feel that being or having autism doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. It's just another way to think. It's the way that they process things, where I may see, just a wood floor. My son with autism may see a pattern, like he may see something that's completely different. His perspective is completely different than mine. And I think that we should be more open-minded to people with different perspectives and different ways of learning and processing information, because there's so many people that were believed to have autism or had very autistic trait, like Albert Einstein, Thomas Jefferson, Michelangelo, Mozart, and, there's things that they didn't like. Maybe it wasn't being touched or other types of affection, or they had trouble with language, or they heard things differently. So I think finding a cure would take away all these amazing people that are fine just the way they are. We don't know who's going to cure cancer or who is going to be the next big change. But if somebody can see things in a way that no one else can see it, then maybe that's the person that is going to do those things.
That's a very valid point. Like you said, with Albert Einstein, Michelangelo, if they did those testings and aborted those pregnancies, we wouldn't have those great minds and the great contributions that they contributed to society.
Exactly. And if they cured their autism after they were born, then, it would change the way that they see and they think. And, that's what makes them them. That's what makes anybody who they are. I think if we would just learn to be more accepting instead of judging right away that, maybe this isn't just a bad child having a tantrum. Maybe this is a store that has too many lights, or the floor is so shiny that it makes it scary to walk on. We can just be a little bit more understanding to other people. I think that, we don't need a cure. We just need acceptance and awareness.
I definitely agree with you that the world definitely needs more acceptance and awareness and understanding that people are different and being okay with that. Just because, something that we say on this podcast very often, just because I don't agree with you, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to listen to you. Just because I don't agree with you, that doesn't mean that you can't add value to the conversation, or that I can learn something based on your perspective. So having these conversations, learning more, learning different things, getting different perspectives, understanding, as you said, about, the kid going in the store and you saying it's a tantrum versus, there is 9 times out of 10, there's more to the story than we see or we know that gives reason to why so-and-so is doing this or so-and-so is doing that. And if we find out those reasons, we can usually we tend to empathize and say, oh, that makes sense. I get why they did that. I might not have did that, but I can see why they did. And then you have that acceptance. So that's definitely something that, like I said, on this podcast, we try to convey and bring to the world is openness.
That's awesome.
I wanted to ask you, what would be the advice that you would give to someone that was in your position when you first found out?
My advice would be to be okay with feeling sad and depressed, and to go through all of those hard, difficult feelings, and to do it in whatever way you feel is best, and then to pick yourself up, join a lot of groups, meet a lot of parents, ask a lot of questions, show up to everything, be a part of therapies. Don't just drop your kid off and expect a therapist to fix your child. Be a part of what's going on. Learn about different techniques that the therapists use, because they have so much knowledge, and something very difficult for you even at home could be fixed by asking the right questions, and talk to people about how you feel. If you're sad, if you're depressed, let people know. And if you decide that you don't want to let people know about your child and what you're going through, then don't. Be private and take the time that you need for yourself, because it's a lifelong journey. How
are you dealing with it now in comparison to when in the very beginning? How are you dealing with it now, just personally, as a mother, as a parent, just as a person?
I think I'm doing better than I was. I still have days where I feel very down and very worried, and there's things that can make me cry so quickly. So I think that even though I still feel tired, exhausted, overworked, and sad, that I still feel like I'm doing better. I think that I have a great support team. My husband is amazing with both of our children, and he will make sure that anything that my son, is working on, he'll make sure that we have, the right toys or the right things at home, and that we're able to do things the way that the school's doing it. And I also have a group of mom friends. We go out once a month, and we have drinks and we have dinner, and we talk about things that are stressing us out. We have a group text. So I think all of these things are super helpful to me. And the other autism moms, they're like no one else. They are funny. They're open-minded. Most of them, they do judge each other. I think that there's a lot of controversy on a lot of things with autism, and there are parents who get very upset, and they go back and forth about things. But for the most part, I have a great group of friends, and they really help, especially all those low times. I can send to a group text and talk about how frustrated I am over potty training, or something like my son said this or this happened, and it's cool. We have a great support team, just us girls.
That's good to have a support system. Everybody needs support, no matter how strong or how strong you might think you are. We all need support in some regard. We can't do this alone. I think it's a very important, and to me that goes for anything in life. We need support system. We need people. We need human interaction. It's important.
Very true.
What are some of the things that people that don't know, people that are ignorant to autism, shouldn't do when approaching a family that has a child with autism? Or you might have a family member and you want to be a support system, you want to have that support, but you're just not quite sure how to. What would your advice be for them to approach that situation? Because you don't want to be offensive.
I think to the first part, when you're saying people who aren't familiar with, there are a few things that I think that people who are not familiar with do when they know you have a child with autism. One is they always try to cure your child. They try to send you articles and diets and new trial medicines and all these things that they tell you should do because this is going to cure your child. That is really frustrating. I think I get emails from people still, and my son's been diagnosed for more than 2 years, and people still tell me that they have this new miracle thing. But I do read things, and I do, look into it. But a lot of what I know and what I've been around, I can tell real articles from fake articles. And, sometimes children don't have autism. They're misdiagnosed at a young age. And, you see a lot of things that people say fix that child or whatnot. And it sounds more like the person actually outgrew those things or
more
something
of a
else.
misdiagnosis than an actual. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when you know somebody, don't always talk about, so-and-so also has a child, and I heard that autism is this or autism is that. It's like my child is not anybody else's. I get tagged still in videos of children with autism that have these amazing musical abilities, or they can paint pictures by looking at something for a short amount of time. And it is inspiring, but it's also frustrating because I'm at an age where my son is still pretty functioning low. So it's frustrating because I'm like, that child has different problems than my son has, and that child is not my child. And they'll say oh, you're blessed to have a child with autism because this child is a musical genius. It's like, well, why does that child have anything to do with mine? So I think definitely staying away from acting like what it is because you have a friend or a family member or somebody else that has told you what it's like. I think asking questions about the specific child is a great technique. Trying to play with the child and maybe not getting too close, but looking at his social cues or her social cues. What do they seem to be into? Pretending you're into those things too, and listening, not judging, and not making the parents or the family feel like something is too much. I've had a lot of older people who have been around my son and said things thinking they were joking or saying it as a joke, but it turned out to be for me it was super offensive. And one time it was, me calling my son. And one of the things with autism is that they don't make eye contact, or, they may not listen, and respond right away. So I was calling his name, and somebody made a joke like, "Oh, wow, he doesn't even know his own name." And for me, it was heartbreaking. But for them, it was a joke, like, "Ha, your son is ignoring you," and it's and I'm just making a joke about him ignoring you, basically. But for me, it was like, you don't understand how hard I work just for him to even look my way, even after maybe me saying his name 30 times. Like that for us takes work. So I think just being more careful with your words, asking more questions, and making less assumptions is a good way to be around a family or a person with autism.
I think those are some great tips and suggestions that we can apply, and hopefully listeners can apply that didn't know about it, because like I said, I'm learning about this more and more each day, and those are things that I definitely will take when I am in those situations. So I definitely appreciate that, and I think other people will appreciate it as well. The last thing that I do want to ask you is, how was telling your family about it and informing them about it, and how did that go, and how did they kind of handle it and deal with it?
Telling my family was really hard, but I think I called my mom just crying, and she said, like, it's going to be okay. And I don't think she really knew what it was, and she was just like telling me, "Well, is he going to be okay? Did they say everything's going to be okay?" "Yes." And she said, "Then everything's going to be okay, And my dad was he's a big jokester, and he's very, very nice. And he doesn't like seeing people like uncomfortable or, sad or upset. So when I told him and I was upset, he was just like, "Oh no, he's fine. He's going to outgrow it. He'll be fine." And even now when we talk about it, my dad gets very offended when people talk about any person or people with any type of disability. It really, really hits his heart now. And he is very encouraging now. He tells me, like, "Wow, he's doing so much better," or, "Gosh, my smart boy is getting so big." And he's just a very positive person. So he never really said, "Okay, he has autism." It was just kind of like, "No, he doesn't, and he's going to outgrow it," and kind of just pushed it away lightly. But has always been very helpful and very, open-minded with everything. And so that was nice. With my husband's family, his sisters, he has two sisters that are nurses, and they right away said, well, first, they said they were sorry, and then they said that they did see signs and they didn't want to say anything, and, but, it's good that we got a diagnosis and that he's going to be okay. And it was hard, and that kind of didn't leave the immediate family for a while, and then, slowly, like, reach out to each brother and, then, tell other people, other friends. And I kept it very, very private. I stayed to myself and, until I was ready. And I think one day the way that I told the rest of the world was just through a long Facebook post, and was just saying how proud I was of my son and how hard he works to do things that other kids are able to do with ease, and that, he was diagnosed, and that we've been doing so many hours of therapy a week, and that, how hard, how strong of a kid he was. That was my way of just kind of letting it out to everybody else, was I'm so proud of him. He's so strong, and he works so hard, and he does have autism, but I don't care anymore. And I had all this pride in him. It was no longer sad.
You just love him.
Yeah.
And what was the reception from the Facebook message?
So the awesome thing was I actually got a lot of private messages. I got a lot of love and support on there, and a lot of, we will pray for you. You guys are in our prayers, and just a lot of nice things. But I did, and I still do, get a lot of messages about people questioning their own children. And, "Hey, how did you know? What was happening? Because my child is doing this, and that. Do you know what that is?" And, I love it, because now I'm able to point people in the right direction. Like, "No, that's actually not a sign of autism," or, "It sounds like you should look into this. And, I know of this that could help you for now, but these are the steps to take." And I always reassure people that, just because my son has autism and their child does something that my son does, that doesn't mean that their child has autism. There's a lot of behaviors that we have as infants and toddlers that we outgrow. And there's
some overlap between what you call them NTs and non-NTs. So
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I also received messages from people who have children with autism that I didn't know and that haven't told other people, and just said, wow, you're so brave. And I just want to let you know that it gets easier. And if you have questions, let me know. And I thought that was awesome too, because it was like they trusted me, they didn't want other people to know. But they trusted me, and I love that. I have a lot of people who come to me for questions or advice, or where should I go, or what should I do? And because I worked in the medical field for so long, I have like the basic knowledge of how to get through things, and how to get things kind of expedited now that I've gone through it. So I love it.
That's great that you became a resource for others, to them as well. So that's awesome that you can help people just like you were helped in your situation.
Exactly. And once my kids are in school full time, and I go back to work, because I don't work right now, my son's schedule's really hectic. He starts school from 9 to 1 most days, and then I pick him up at 1, and then he usually will start his home therapy at 2:30, and he goes 2:30 to 6, and his only day off is Saturdays, and then Sunday we have a short 2-hour home session. But he basically is busy from 9 to 6, and he gets a nap in between, and he gets a few minute breaks, but he works 40 hours a week.
Yeah, that's a full schedule. So.
Yeah, so once his schedule and he's in school full time and his therapy's decreased, because we're hoping once we're more caught up that we can do less and we can see more. So I think at that point, when I do go back to work, I want to go back and volunteer somewhere to help parents with any children that have just been diagnosed or were born with any type of issues. I would love to be that person and be that resource, and to tell people, I've been through this and I've seen it, and I know how hard it is and how frustrating it is, and I know God chose me for my son, because I am definitely the only person that could probably handle him and his routine and all the obstacles that are coming with it.
He knew you were strong enough. The very last question that I do want to ask you is, what is the best thing about Max that the world doesn't get to see, that it's kind of only that you really get to see that best part? Or you and your husband, I would say.
My son is so smart. Those imperfections that he's able to find, he's funny with it. When he first found this crack in the floor, he would circle around it, and I always wondered why he was circling around it, because he was only 13 or 14 months. And then I realized that he found a crack in our floor, and so it's he's able to find this crazy imperfections, and I can't wait till he talks, because I wonder is he going to be into art, or is he going to be into music, or what's going to interest him because of how well he sees things. But I am very thankful that the best part about him, how loving he is, that he shows it to everyone, and it's not something that no one else sees, but everyone loves it about him. He loves to give hugs, and he loves to squeeze people really tight, and that's something that most children with autism don't like. But he's such a cuddler, and he's fun. He's always happy, and he laughs so much, and he's like that with everyone. And I really love that. People notice him right away, especially at schools and different programs that he's been in, just how loving and how happy of a child he is. I love that about him. And I think people probably think that he's not always like that he has to have some sort of sad or frustrated moments, but he actually doesn't. He's the happiest baby. Well, happiest, my baby.
Max sounds like a great little guy. First, I want to say thank you so much for coming and doing this podcast. I feel like I've learned a lot. I think a lot of people will have learned a lot as well from listening to this. So I definitely want to say thank you to you, your husband, and Max as well, for letting us into your world and sharing this story with us, and getting a perspective, again, that I don't think a lot of people have, or have a deep understanding of it as I think we got on this podcast. Is there anything else that you felt like you wanted to add or say that we didn't get a chance to get to?
I think there's just a few things, there's a big controversy with like vaccines and do vaccines cause autism? I think that when you meet a parent of a child with autism, the causes and the things that you may have read or the things that you believe, they can be very hurtful when you're talking to someone, because like I said, I felt guilty and to blame for my son's diagnosis. So I think those debates and those personal questions, like, people should be more aware, of what they're saying and what they're asking, and to not really go there, I guess. Like, don't go there. Don't ask about that. Don't make that like a big thing.
I was going to ask you, do you think that would be that's kind of those questions that should be saved for like the political arena when they're discussing and like in that sort of arena versus when you're trying to talk to somebody on a personal level? Those are not personal questions that you should ask a parent. Is that is that kind of where you're leaning to?
Yes, exactly. Like, a lot of people like to give advice. Like I said earlier, oh, so and so said this. Oh, so and so did this. And there's actually cleanses that people do to their children, and they have them drinking these different, I don't even know what they are, basically to clear the body of toxins. And parents have put their kids through a lot of different things because they read these things. And I think that people don't realize they put more pressure on the parent, to think, well, maybe I should be doing more. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I should be doing less. I just think that those questions, and there's a lot of things I think with the causes of autism that should just be, left out, even if it is someone that's really close to you. Like, let them bring it up or ask if they're comfortable talking about it. Don't just automatically do it. I have very close family members who still tell me that so-and-so is the cause of autism and that I should be doing this. And it's hurtful. And I know they come from a good place, but it's very hurtful.
My stance would be, and I didn't want to ask that question in the first place for this interview. And the reason why I didn't want to ask it is because to me, it's kind of irrelevant of the cause, because we're at the point now where your son's 4, you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it would be different if I was talking to somebody on ways to prevent it from happening in the future. But if I'm talking to somebody that's already in it, there's no sense in me talking to them about preventing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like,
yeah, and
so
it's
that's
true.
why.
And it leads parents to, I mean, I'm friends with a lot of parents of children with autism, and parents have tried the craziest things because people tell them, these things, and they're trying to fix and cure autism. And it's sad, because one person, feels a certain way about something, and then they want to make it a topic. So yeah, I think, remember your boundaries, I guess, with parents and of children that are different. And when you're out in a store and you see something, like, it's okay to offer help even to the mom, like, it's okay. Like, if you see my son doing something that maybe your neurotypical child may not do, like, it's okay to look and to smile. Like, you don't have to just pretend like he doesn't exist and he's not there. And just because he's doing something different, I think it makes people uncomfortable to see things that are different. And, my son doesn't understand even what he's doing most of the time. He's too far gone into what he's doing. But, I love when people pass me by in the store and they have nice things to say about my son, even though he may do something different, or, just positive people. Like, we do so much tearing down, we tear each other apart over everything. And I think just being nicer and more open-minded to other types of people, that would be so great. I wish I could deal with people like that more often, instead of people looking and judging and, making me feel like I'm not doing enough or I'm a bad parent.
Like I said, I'm not going to lie and act like I understand where you're coming from, but I can, based on the things that you told me, I can definitely picture those situations. And like you said about, a kid in the store, how people will act like they don't see it, like the kid's invisible. And I can see that being hurtful as well. Because everybody wants to, their presence to be acknowledged. And even if Max doesn't realize that you're not acknowledging his presence, you as a mother do. And so just taking that into consideration and just being, like you said, being a little bit more open-minded and accepting, I think will go a long way.
For sure.
Is there anything else that you want to let people know about, any organizations or things like that, as you said, what was it, the Region Center? I believe that was called?
Regional Center.
The Regional Center. I definitely will put that on the description because it seemed like it was very instrumental in helping you. I want to make sure that other people are aware of that resources as well.
Definitely, and they have a lot of different resources through them. Even if you don't have a child that has a diagnosis, they do evaluations there. If you, even suspect something maybe different, they have the perfect resources to send you exactly where you need to go. They help assist you financially if you need it. But most of all services right now are covered for under 3, and most of them they come directly to your home. So they make everything pretty easy, and they have a lot of classes and a lot of things to learn from. And, if you just use the speech services while your child catches up, and then, your child is, in regular classes and completely caught up developmentally, then, they're also good for things like that. It's just, you don't have to have a disability, but if you have any questions or anything that you feel like, you're unsure if it's normal, they're great resources, and they have great doctors, and I love that they help everyone and anyone.
Yeah, that's amazing. I definitely I'm gonna put that information up on the description. So if anybody out there is listening, you can go to the description and get more information about that, or use a friendly Google or Bing. But like I said, I'll try to get as much of that information up as I can. Again, I want to say thank you so much for doing this podcast, doing this interview, and bringing this into your world. I know it's not the easiest thing to allow people into your world and get so personal and deep, but I guarantee you there's going to be people that listen to this and that appreciate it, and opens people's minds, and hopefully we'll get more acceptance and openness of others because they have a better understanding. I think that's a key for a lot of people is they don't know. There are some people that know and still are still aren't open, but I think some of it is just lack of information.
I agree, and I just want to thank you for letting me, come and talk today, and thank you for everyone who listened in. And if you don't agree with something that I said, or if I offended you in any way because you feel differently, I apologize. This is just my journey and my story with my son. And if anyone has any questions or, just wants to talk about anything that, maybe be related to autism, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And, you can feel free to send me a message or ask me a question. And, I'm always open-minded. And I love talking about the journey of my son and what autism is and what it isn't. It's my whole life now, and I would love to educate and inform as many people as I could.
We'll have Anissa's information up, the information on our page to get in contact with her, and then we'll have the information about the regional center as well, and some other information that is related to autism and just educating people about autism. So we'll end the podcast as we normally do. Our motto: live, listen to some great music, and above all, love more. We're out.